Hello, public opinion aficionados, and welcome to Rasmussen Reports, where you'll hear directly from the pollster's mouth what America thinks. And we think that that's way more newsworthy, especially in a representative democracy, than what hundreds of pundits out there are trying to do in predicting the outcome of a major political turning point. And of course, I'm talking about tomorrow's first presidential debate, a very abnormal debate between Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. Now, this has been an absolutely crazy news week. Just to scratch the surface, we have the Steve Bannon and Merrick Garland contempt drama playing out in Congress, an absolutely packed slate of Supreme Court rulings that the Democrats hope will give them more anti-Supreme Court ammunition, just like the Dobbs decision did for the midterms. Lots of new election integrity news. And if you want to get a sampling, please go to our Twitter feed at Rasmussen_poll. Of course, there's also the intrigue of the potential vice president selection that might happen tomorrow night. And then the debate like no other. Seated, no audience, biased moderators. It goes on and on. Now, we had to rush this video out. Sorry for the lack of graphics, but there's a ton of new exciting poll numbers. So what we're going to be covering is, first, we're checking in with Americans on who they think is going to win the debate and whether or not age will play an issue. And hold on to the end, because we'll have some numbers for the Republican vice presidential selection. And we'll also try to give our best guess as well. But on to what America thinks. Conducted just last week, a survey of 1,080 U.S. likely voters. President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump are scheduled to meet June 27th, tomorrow, in their first debate of this campaign. Donald Trump is 78 years old and Joe Biden is 81 years old. Which candidate is more likely to have problems in the debate because of his age? And Joe Biden wins it, if you can call it that, with 57% of U.S. likely voters. But 32% of voters think that Donald Trump is going to be having more problems with his age. Now, if you've been keeping track, you'll know that that 57% number is the exact same number of people who think that over time, Joe Biden is getting less and less mentally sharp. And that's a sad reality that I think Joe Biden and his candidacy are going to have to wrestle with tomorrow. 57% think he has some form of mental decline, that age is going to be more of a problem for his than for his opponent. And then, time and time again, we've polled, and a strong majority of voters have told us that they don't think that Joe Biden is physically and mentally fit for the job of president. Now, we put the demographics in here, and by age, 18 to 39-year-olds are less likely to say Joe Biden's got an age problem, but still it's a majority, 53 to 33. Everybody else, it's almost 60%. Hispanic voters are actually most likely to say that age is going to be a bigger problem for Joe Biden. But white voters, it's also 57% to 34%. And even a plurality of black voters admit that Joe Biden's age is more of a problem. Democrats are split 43% to 43%. And, that 43% is a high. That's really a high number. I didn't expect to see results like this. Although Republicans only say Biden by 72% to 24%. We've never really seen higher than a 25 or 26% Republican anti-Trump signal. And it's interesting to see that rear its head here. But independents say Joe Biden by 57% to 28%. Now, I put Biden approval in here too because I thought it was the most interesting. It, as it often is the biggest signal of anywhere in the crosstabs. And, 75% of Joe Biden's strong approvers say that Donald Trump has a bigger problem with age. Only 14% say Joe Biden. Of course, the somewhat approves look a lot more like Democrats in general. So really, Joe Biden's strong approvers are an entirely different animal than Democrats. These numbers couldn't be farther apart. Now, the somewhat disapproves are looking like the independents, and of course, strongly disapproves have even bigger numbers than Republicans, as they often do. But on to the next question. Who is most likely to win the first debate? And these numbers actually look kind of similar to the 2024 matchup. I guess that's no surprise. But 47% of voters say Donald Trump, 37% say Joe Biden. There's a bigger not sure number, I guess, that's allowing for the potential uncertainty of what might come up during the debate. But again, Donald Trump is beating Joe Biden by 10 points, which is the same as our latest multi-way matchup for 2024. Now, I put race in here because I thought it was interesting. Black voters are more likely to say age is an issue for Joe Biden, but they're also way more likely to say that Joe Biden is going to win the debate, 58% to 24%. But 24% of black voters saying that Donald Trump's going to win the debate, kind of in line with the amount of black support he's been getting in our matchups. Now, the party numbers show a massive crossover advantage. 17% of Democrats think Donald Trump's going to win. Only 69% say Joe Biden. But among Republicans, there's a lot more confidence. 81% say Donald Trump, 9% say Biden. And the independents, again, very similar to the matchups, give Donald Trump a 14-point advantage. Now, we have to thank Vivek Ramaswamy for supplying us bountiful, great quotes that we can test. Our most recent was on the Great Replacement. And we showed that, a majority of voters do think that that is a fundamental component of the Democrat platform. But for this one, do you agree or disagree with this statement? The first debate is Joe Biden's last chance. And if he loses the debate, Democrats will replace Biden with another candidate. And 47% of voters agree with that statement. Only 39% disagree. Only 23% disagree strongly. Now, what's important to look at is the Democrats. Not too many of them, 34%, agree with that statement, but only 35% strongly disagree. If he really is their candidate, I think you'd see higher strongly disagree numbers. Now, the Republicans, a majority, 62%, say they agree with that. 21% disagree. And independents, it's 45% to 40%. They're a little bit more split. But here's the signal I think you would hope to see from Democrats, showing again a very clear rift between Joe Biden's strongest approvers and Democrats at large. 62% of these guys strongly disagree with that statement. Another 16% somewhat agree, for a total of 78% absolute confidence that no, of course Joe Biden, no matter what happens tomorrow, is the candidate. And nobody else is drinking that Kool-Aid. But on to the vice presidential results. And I know all of you have a favorite candidate that may not have made it onto this list. We've run this a couple times and used different names. It's impossible to know every person that may or may not have been considered. The Trump campaign did this a little differently than many campaigns and didn't really publish short lists. It could literally be anyone on the planet. And of course, we can't poll that. But amongst all likely voters out of this list, if Donald Trump is the Republican presidential candidate, which of the following would be his best choice as a vice presidential running mate? And Ron DeSantis wins barely with 15%, and Tim Scott and Dr. Ben Carson are tied for second at 11%. Now, I'm going to skip ahead to the party numbers because they obviously matter most here. And among Republicans, Ron DeSantis has a much higher lead here, 23%. Second place is Tim Scott. Third place is other candidate, but then Ben Carson comes in at fourth with 10%. Everybody else is single digits. J.D. Vance, Vivek Ramaswamy, Doug Burgum, all kind of polling in the same place. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, 5%. Byron Donalds, 4%. Now, there's a lot of reasons why one might pick vice presidential candidate. Some would argue that potentially the biggest reason for Donald Trump to pick one would be as what some call assassination insurance. But another, and the Democrats do this all the time, is to pick somebody that appeals to a demographic that you would like more votes from. Now, Donald Trump famously doesn't poll as well with women. And as you can see here, with the only woman on the list, Sarah Huckabee Sanders does do better among women, but probably not enough to count that much. Among younger voters, Ron DeSantis still takes the lead, but Tim Scott and Ben Carson are tied for second. Now, some would say that Donald Trump would be well advised to pick a candidate that polls well among black voters. And in this case, Ben Carson wins by a very handy margin. Now, white and Hispanic voters, again, overwhelmingly pick Ron DeSantis, but he probably has the most name recognition. But here's what really matters. Will Trump's choice of a vice presidential running mate make much difference in whether you would vote for him? 13% say yes, 80% say no. And as you can see here, pretty much nobody says yes, and pretty much everybody says no by a massive majority. 82% of Republicans say no, only 12% say yes. 85% of Biden's strong disapprovers say no, only 8% say yes. But why these numbers may be important is that if you look at Biden somewhat approve and somewhat disapproves, 24% of somewhat approve say yes, 15% of somewhat disapprove say yes. And by age, 18 to 39-year-olds, 23% say yes. So 18 to 39-year-olds, although it's tough to say that the vice presidential selection matters much, it matters more than voters of every other age group. So ultimately, there isn't a massive leader except maybe Ron DeSantis. Voters say it really doesn't matter much. I also don't think the polling matters that much to the Trump campaign, and they're likely going to make their selection based on who knows what kind of factors. Probably something that maybe in just Donald Trump's personal interests. But in the list we have, Ron DeSantis does well, but apparently isn't an option. Tim Scott is tied for second with Ben Carson, but Carson does much, much better among black voters, and I think that's really important. J.D. Vance really isn't a contender here, and he's kind of neck and neck with Vivek and Doug Burgum. Sanders and Donald's lag, and neither of them seems to add much from a diversity checkpoint perspective. And, you know, we picked this list to try and capture who we thought the real contenders were. The way we see it, our internal bet is probably Ben Carson. He's had a really accomplished career, great conservative street cred. And I think it's fair to say that his self-poise may be accretive to the Trump campaign, although we really don't have a high level of confidence in this prediction. But at the end of the day, most voters say it doesn't matter, except young voters say it matters most. And again, they pick Carson. But as far as the debate goes, I think it's fair to say that Donald Trump is more experienced at defending his presidential accomplishments, especially as far as hostile environments goes. And in general, Biden doesn't seem to get a lot of hard questions. He still is probably going to get treated with kitten gloves tomorrow, but I think voters want to hear him answer for what happened in their eyes in the last 4 years. Keep in mind, 4 years ago, he took over 50% of the electorate, and right now he's polling at 40%. So he has lost 10% of people. Donald Trump has picked up a lot of them, but not all of them. So a lot of that 10% is up in the air. They want to hear what Joe Biden has to say for his presidency, and Joe Biden outright lying about his accomplishments or gaslighting people that everything is great economically and from a national security perspective, and even as far as the border goes, that's not going to do it. So this is really a big chance for both Donald Trump and Joe Biden to change the opinion of a really large percent of the electorate. Although no matter what happens, Joe Biden will probably be declared by everyone in the mainstream media as the debate winner. I think the bar so low that all he has to do is make it to the finish line without having a heart attack. But if you want to see what voters think of the debate after it happens, make sure you subscribe on YouTube or Rumble. Follow us on Twitter at Rasmussen_poll. Hit me up as well at Mark_R_Mitchell. And thanks for watching.